The icy November wind cut through Lena Thompson's thin hoodie as she trudged toward the bus stop, exhausted from another long day. 3 morning classes, followed by an 8-hour shift at Steady Brew, the small coffee shop where she worked, had left her drained. Her fingers ached from making lattes, her feet throbbed from standing too long, and her mind swirled with worry about next week's exam, about rent, about whether her mother had taken her medication. She shivered, tucking her hands into the pockets of her worn-out hoodie. Winter was coming fast, and she still couldn't afford a decent coat. The familiar Route 42 bus pulled up right on time, the doors creaking open. Lena climbed aboard, flashed her monthly pass at the driver, a middle-aged man with permanently furrowed brows, and slumped into a seat near the back. The moment her body sank into the cushion, she let out a sigh of relief. She leaned her forehead against the cool window, watching the city lights blur together as the exhaustion in her bones settled deeper. Just as the driver was about to close the doors, a voice called out, "Wait!" The driver hesitated but reopened the doors with an irritated sigh. A young man, slightly out of breath, hurried onto the bus. He looked to be in his early 20s, dressed simply in jeans and a gray sweater, plain, yet somehow expensive looking. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, and there was something about his confident posture that made a few passengers glance up. "That'll be $3.50, the driver said, already impatient. The young man reached into his pockets, patting them down, his expression shifting from mild frustration to clear embarrassment. I think I left my wallet in my other," he stopped mid-sentence, his face turning slightly red. "No money, no ride," the driver stated flatly, already reaching for the door controls. Lena watched the scene unfold, recognizing that look of humiliation all too well. She had been there before, counting every dollar, feeling the weight of struggling just to get by. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket and pulled out 3 crumpled dollar bills and 2 quarters, leftover tip money from earlier. "Here," she said, stepping forward and handing the fare to the driver. The young man turned to her, his hazel eyes wide with surprise. "You don't have to. Just take it," Lena said with a tired smile, already turning back to her seat. For a moment, he seemed ready to refuse. Then, after a brief hesitation, he nodded. "Thank you," he said, sincerity in his voice. "I'll pay you back somehow." "Don't worry about it," she replied, waving off his concern. He took a seat a few rows ahead but glanced back at her occasionally, as if studying her. Lena barely noticed. Her mind had already wandered to other worries, her midterm paper, the past due electric bill, and whether her mom had remembered to eat dinner. She had no idea that she had just helped Noah Sinclair, a man whose face occasionally appeared in business magazines, heir to the Sinclair Grand Hotel's empire. And Noah, sitting there in the dimly lit bus, had no idea why this small act of kindness had struck him so deeply. As the city lights flickered past, he stole one last glance at Lena, her blue hoodie pulled tight around her as she rested against the window, her face peaceful despite the exhaustion in her features. For the first time in a long time, Noah felt something real. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single moment would change both of their lives forever. The morning rush at Steady Brew was in full swing. Lena Thompson moved with practiced efficiency behind the counter, steaming milk, pulling espresso shots, and sliding drinks across to customers who barely looked up from their phones. She had been working here for almost 2 years, and at this point, making a perfect caramel latte was second nature. "Grande caramel latte with almond milk," she called, placing the cup on the pickup counter. "Thanks," a familiar voice replied. Lena glanced up and froze. Standing before her, wearing the same gray sweater and jeans, was the guy from the bus. In the bright morning light, She noticed details she had missed before, the sharp lines of his jaw, the way his hair naturally fell in waves, and the ease with which he carried himself, as if completely comfortable in his own skin. "It's you," she said, startled. A small smile played at his lips. "Told you I'd pay you back for $3.50. Lena raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to come all this way just for that." "Maybe I wanted good coffee too," he replied, amusement in his voice. "I'm Noah, by the way." Before Lena could respond, her coworker Lisa nudged her sharply. "We've got 6 people waiting, Lena," Lisa hissed under her breath. Lena sighed. "Right, sorry." She turned back to Noah. "I have to." "Of course," he said, dropping a $5 bill into the tip jar. "Thanks again, Lena." She watched as he moved to a table by the window, pulling out, not a phone, but a book. Something about that struck her as unusual. Most people buried themselves in screens, but here he was, quietly reading while sipping his coffee. Throughout her shift, she caught him glancing up occasionally, their eyes meeting for a brief second before they both looked away. It was silly, really, but it left a strange warmth in her chest. When the morning rush finally slowed, Lena grabbed a rag and wiped down nearby tables, stopping at his. "So," she said, smirking, "do you make a habit of forgetting your wallet?" Noah laughed, closing his book. "Not usually. Yesterday was unusual." "How so?" she asked, intrigued. He hesitated before replying. "Let's just say I'm trying something different with my life." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious." "Not intentionally." His expression softened, turning sincere. "Actually, I came back because, this might sound strange, but you're the first person who's done something nice for me without expecting anything in return." "It was just bus fare," Lena said, shrugging. "Still," he said, watching her carefully. "I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe coffee sometime? When you're not working?" Lena hesitated. She didn't know him, not really. But there was something about the way he spoke, something about the way he looked at her, like he wasn't just saying the words to be polite. "I don't even know you," she pointed out. "That's what coffee is for," he said with a grin. Before she could answer, her manager's voice rang out from behind the counter. "Lena." "Break's over." Lena exhaled. "I have to go." "I'm here most mornings," Noah said quickly. "Think about it." She nodded, though she wasn't sure why. The next day, when she didn't see him, she told herself it was ridiculous to feel disappointed. But when he walked through the door the following morning, ordering a black coffee and casually asking about her day, she couldn't ignore the flicker of something new, something exciting, growing between them. What had started as a chance encounter was quickly becoming a habit. And what Lena didn't realize was just how complicated that habit would soon become. The Wednesday afternoon rush at Steady Brew had finally slowed, leaving Lena Thompson a few moments to breathe. She wiped down the espresso machine, humming softly to herself. The past few weeks had been like something out of a movie, late-night conversations, weekend walks in the park, stolen moments of laughter between shifts. Noah Sinclair had become part of her routine, slipping into her life with an ease that felt almost too good to be true. And, as it turned out, it was. "Can I get a cappuccino?" a woman's voice called from the counter. Lena turned to see a woman in her 30s, sharp-eyed, with a press badge hanging around her neck. "Coming right up," Lena said, reaching for the portafilter. The bell above the door chimed, and just as she glanced up, Noah walked in, his face lighting up at the sight of her. Before he could say a word, a man in a business suit standing near the register did a double take. "No way," the man muttered, pulling out his phone. Noah froze. His posture stiffened as if he had been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to. The businessman squinted. "Noah Sinclair? What are you doing here?" Lena blinked, confused. "Sinclair?" Before she could process it, the woman with the press badge let out a sharp breath. "Wait a second. Noah Sinclair? As in Sinclair Grand Hotels?" She was already pulling out her phone. Noah reacted instantly. "Melissa, don't." But it was too late. The journalist's eyes gleamed with excitement as she began snapping photos. Hotel Air Noah Sinclair spotted working class chic at a local coffee shop. Is this some kind of publicity stunt? Lena felt the air drain from her lungs. Sinclair Grand Hotels. The name was impossible to ignore, one of the biggest luxury hotel chains in the world. She had walked past their sleek, glass-covered buildings, seen their billboards towering over the city. And now, the man who had spent the past month pretending to be just another regular guy was suddenly someone else entirely. Her hands trembled as she set the cappuccino on the counter, hot milk sloshing over the edge. "Sophie," Noah started, his voice urgent. "Sophie?" The journalist's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, this is Rich, literally." She turned to Lena. "Honey, how long have you known who he is?" Lena could barely breathe. "I didn't." The woman scoffed. "Come on. A billionaire's son hanging out in a small-town coffee shop? That's a little too cute." She smirked. "Or were you in on the game?" Lena felt sick. "I can explain," Noah pleaded, stepping toward her. But Lisa, who had been standing nearby, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold, cut in first. "Hold on. You're that Noah Sinclair?" She turned to Lena, eyes widening. "You knew?" Lena shook her head violently. "I had no idea." Lisa scoffed. "Well, now it makes sense. The big tips. The way he never talks about his past. And that watch, I thought it was fake, but now," she let out a laugh, shaking her head. Lena took a step back. The coffee shop had started to feel suffocating, too small, too loud. Noah reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Were you ever going to tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," he said quickly. I wanted to find the right time." Lena's stomach twisted. "The right time," she echoed. "The right time was before I fell for you. Not after everyone else figured it out." Lisa crossed her arms. "Guess the fantasy's over." Noah's eyes were pleading. "Please, Lena, let me explain." But she had already untied her apron. "I need a break," she muttered, pushing past him. She walked straight to the staff room, shutting the door behind her. Only then did she let the tears fall. Noah Sinclair stood on the marble balcony of his father's penthouse, staring out at the endless city skyline. The lights of Sinclair Grand Hotels glittered in the distance, a constant reminder of the empire he was supposed to inherit. The weight of expectations pressed down on him, heavier than ever. It had been 3 days since Lena had walked away. 3 days since the truth had shattered everything between them. He had called, texted, every attempt met with silence. He had lost her. And now, standing in the cold night air, he realized he had lost himself long before that. The phone in his hand buzzed. His father. Noah let out a breath and answered. Finally, Richard Sinclair's clipped voice came through. "We need to discuss your return. The board is restless. This distraction has gone on long enough." Noah closed his eyes. He could already predict the conversation, his father demanding his compliance, brushing off Noah's time away as nothing more than youthful rebellion. "I'm not coming back," Noah said, voice steady. Silence. Then a sharp laugh. "Of course you are. You were born for this." "No," Noah said. "I was born into it." "That's not the same thing." His father's tone darkened. "You think playing poor has made you wise? That girl, this game you played, it's time to grow up, Noah." "This isn't about Lena," Noah snapped. "It's about me. I've spent my whole life being told who I am. I want to figure it out for myself." Richard exhaled sharply. "You're a Sinclair. That's all you need to be." "No," Noah said, gripping the balcony railing. "That's all you need me to be." His father's voice was colder now. "If you walk away from this, you walk away from everything. Your inheritance, your shares, your future. Are you willing to give that up?" Noah hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes." The finality of the word rang in his ears. Richard scoffed. "You're making a mistake. And when you realize it, don't expect me to fix it for you." The line went dead. Noah set his phone down on the balcony railing and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his chest for years. He was free. But freedom, as it turned out, came with a cost. 2 weeks later, Noah stood outside the Pinewood Lodge, a small, weathered inn tucked into the mountains, a far cry from the five-star resorts his family owned. The air was crisp, scented with pine and earth, a world away from the polished, artificial world he had known. The owner, Marcus Reed, a gruff man in his 60s, eyed him skeptically. "You ever worked a real job before?" Noah adjusted the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Not like this." Marcus snorted. "Figured. What's a guy like you doing here?" Noah could have given the whole story, the name, the hotels, the lie that had unraveled everything. Instead, he said simply, "Looking for a fresh start." Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We'll see if you last a week. You'll start with maintenance." The pay was $9 an hour, plus room and board. His living quarters? A tiny cabin no bigger than his old walk-in closet. The bed was lumpy, the walls thin, and the shower took forever to warm up. And yet, for the first time in his life, Noah felt at peace. He spent his days fixing leaky pipes, chopping wood, and checking in guests who had no idea who he was. No suits, no board meetings, just work. Honest, tiring, real. One evening, after a long shift, he sat on the lodge's back porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a cheap, basic model, nothing like the latest tech he once carried. A message from James, his old friend. "Your father announced the new CEO today. Stocks dropped 3%. You really did it, huh?" Noah smiled slightly and typed back. "Yeah. And for the first time in my life, I don't regret a thing." 3 weeks had passed since Lena Thompson had last seen Noah Sinclair. 3 weeks of burying herself in work, in school, in anything that would keep her from thinking about him. She took extra shifts at Steady Brew, stayed up late poring over textbooks, and avoided any mention of his name. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't outrun the truth. Noah had lied to her, yes. But he had also walked away from everything for reasons she hadn't taken the time to understand. And, despite everything, she still missed him. It was a Friday evening, and Lena sat at the kitchen table in her small apartment, absently pushing food around her plate. Across from her, Maria Thompson, her mother, watched her carefully. "You're quiet tonight," Maria noted, stirring a pot of soup on the stove. Lena forced a small smile. Long day. Maria wasn't convinced. Is it the boy? Lena nearly dropped her fork. Mom. Maria shrugged. You haven't been yourself since he left. Lena sighed, leaning back in her chair. He lied to me, Mom. 4 weeks. Maybe months. Maria nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. And yet, you're still thinking about him. Lena crossed her arms. I hate that I am. Maria chuckled softly, setting a bowl of soup in front of her daughter. You know, your father wasn't always the man you remember. When we first met, he was kind. Honest. Money changed him, not the other way around. This isn't about Dad, Lena muttered, but the parallel was impossible to ignore. Maria took a sip of her tea. Maybe Noah was playing a role, yes. But maybe he was also searching for something real. You, of all people, should understand what it means to want something more than what life gave you. Lena frowned, staring into her soup. She wanted to argue, to hold on to her anger. But her mother's words settled into her chest like a weight she hadn't been ready to face. Had Noah's deception been about tricking her, or had it been about finding himself? Later that night, Lena sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop balanced in front of her. She had promised herself she wouldn't look, that it didn't matter. But she typed his name into the search bar anyway. A dozen business articles popped up. Sinclair Hotels faces uncertain future after heir walks away. Noah Sinclair resigns, rejects trust fund. Lena's breath caught. She had assumed he would go back to the penthouses, the limousines, the world he had claimed to hate. But he hadn't. He had really left it all behind. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. Did it change anything? Had she been so focused on his lie that she had refused to see the truth behind it? The next morning, Lena sat at her usual table in the campus coffee shop, attempting to study. But the words on the page blurred together, and her mind kept drifting to the same question. Had she been wrong about Noah? She barely noticed when someone approached her table until a tall, well-dressed man cleared his throat. Lena Thompson? She looked up, startled. Yes? I'm James Whitaker, he said, offering his hand. A friend of Noah's. Lena tensed immediately. I don't want to talk about Noah. James pulled out a chair and sat anyway. Just 5 minutes. Lena sighed but didn't stop him. James studied her for a moment. Did you know Noah was supposed to take over as CEO this year? Lena crossed her arms. So, he hated it. All of it. The expectations, the privilege, the way people treated him like a walking bank account. James leaned forward. The day he met you on that bus? He had just walked out of a board meeting after telling his father he wanted something different. Lena's stomach tightened. Why are you telling me this? James smiled slightly. Because Noah's gone. Her breath hitched. Gone? James nodded. He left. Walked away from everything, the money, the inheritance, the company. No one knows where he is. Not even his family. The words hit harder than she expected. She had been so focused on how Noah had deceived her that she hadn't considered what their relationship had meant to him. James stood, placing a slip of paper on the table. The Pinewood Lodge, he said. 6 hours north. That's where he is. Lena stared at the note, heart pounding. Had she been wrong? Had she been so busy resenting him that she had never stopped to wonder why he had done it? And now, he was gone. For the first time in weeks, Lena asked herself the question she had been avoiding. Did she want to let him stay that way? The Pinewood Lodge looked exactly like the picture on its outdated website, rustic, a little worn, but charming in a way that polished hotels could never be. A wooden sign swung gently in the breeze, and beyond the reception cabin, a line of cozy guest cottages stretched toward the tree line. Lena Thompson stood at the edge of the gravel parking lot, gripping the strap of her overnight bag, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent 6 hours on a bus, staring out the window, rehearsing what she might say. Now that she was here, doubt crept in. What if he didn't want to see her? What if he had moved on? What if coming here had been a mistake? Before she could turn back, the lodge's front door swung open. A family emerged, laughing as they headed toward their car. Behind them, a door at the back of the reception cabin opened, and Noah Sinclair stepped out, carrying a stack of fresh towels. He didn't see her at first. Then he did. The towels nearly slipped from his grasp. For a moment, they just stared at each other, Lena, standing on the worn wooden steps, Noah, frozen in place, his flannel shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair longer than she remembered. He looked different. Tanned. Rougher around the edges. And yet, the moment their eyes met, she knew it was still him. Lena. His voice was barely above a whisper. The older man behind the reception desk glanced between them. Take your break, Noah. I'll cover the front. Neither of them spoke as Noah led her outside to a small patio overlooking the mountains. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the valley. The crisp scent of pine filled the air. Noah leaned against the railing, running a hand through his hair. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Lena swallowed. Neither did I. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything left unsaid. Finally, she spoke. I needed to know if any of it was real. His expression softened. All of it was real. He exhaled, shaking his head. Except the parts one didn't tell you. Lena nodded slowly. She had spent weeks telling herself she hated him. That he had betrayed her. But standing here now, she realized something important. He had never lied about his feelings. What are you doing here, Noah? She asked, searching his face. Trying to figure out who I am, he admitted. Without the name. Without the money. Without expectations. He let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. Turns out, I'm not great at fixing plumbing, and I still can't cook to save my life. But for the first time, I feel like I'm actually living. Lena studied him. There was no arrogance in his voice, no trace of the carefully curated charm he had once carried. Just honesty. And what about you? He asked. She hesitated. I don't know. She looked away, focusing on the horizon. I came here because I wanted closure. But now, she trailed off. Noah stepped closer. But now? Lena turned to face him directly. I don't know if I can trust you again. He nodded, accepting the words without argument. That's fair. I also don't know if I want to walk away without giving us a real chance. The confession hung between them, fragile but real. They weren't the same people they had been months ago. The girl who had spent her life playing it safe had gotten on a bus, traveled across the state, and walked straight toward the one thing that scared her most, uncertainty. The boy who had spent his life running from himself had finally stopped, stripped away the wealth, the status, and chosen an unknown future over an inherited one. Maybe they weren't the same. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Noah took a deep breath. So, What happens now? Lena considered the question carefully. Let's start with coffee. He blinked. Coffee? She nodded, meeting his gaze. Next Saturday. My day off. You come to the city. We pick somewhere neutral. No promises. No expectations. Just coffee. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't a relationship, not anymore. But it was something. A door left deliberately ajar, instead of slammed shut. Noah's lips curved into a cautious, hopeful smile. I'd like that. As they walked back toward the lodge, the mountain air crisp around them, Lena realized something. Sometimes, the bravest choice wasn't running away. It wasn't walking away, either. Sometimes, it was simply staying open to what might come next. 2 years later, Lena Thompson stood in the grand marble hallway of the city's Museum of Fine Arts, adjusting the hem of her blazer. Tonight was the opening of her first curated exhibition, Renaissance Women, Forgotten Artists of Florence. A project she had poured her heart into, born from years of late-night studying, early morning coffee shifts, and sheer determination. The past 2 years had been anything but easy. But she had made it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from her mother. So proud of you. See you at 7. She smiled, tucking the phone away, but before she could turn back to the exhibit, another notification lit up her screen. Noah. Running late. Traffic. Save me some of those fancy hors d'oeuvres. Lena rolled her eyes, shaking her head. Some things never changed. Their path back to each other hadn't been simple. That first coffee date? Awkward. Stiff. Uncertain. The second? A little better. Over time, coffee became lunches. Lunches turned into weekend visits to Pinewood Lodge. Conversations that once tiptoed around old wounds grew deeper, more open. For months, they existed in a careful middle ground, not quite together, but not apart either. And then, one evening, as they sat on her tiny apartment floor, surrounded by books and half-finished research notes, Noah had looked at her and simply said, I don't want to be in limbo anymore. Whatever this is, I want it to be real. No hiding. No running. Lena had stared at him, heart pounding. Then, for the first time since that night in the alley, she had whispered the truth she had been too afraid to say. Me too. Now, 2 years later, Noah wasn't a billionaire's heir anymore. After leaving Pinewood Lodge, he had started his own small consulting firm, helping independent hotels survive against corporate chains like the one his family still controlled. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Lena had been there through every rejection, every setback, just as he had been there through her sleepless nights preparing for this exhibition. Their lives were no longer built on secrets and uncertainty but on something real, choice. As the clock struck 7, the museum doors opened, and guests began filing in. Lena took a deep breath, preparing for her opening speech. And then, she saw him. Noah, stepping inside, dressed in a simple dark suit. No pretenses, no carefully curated disguise, just him. He caught her gaze and grinned. She didn't need a dramatic love story anymore. No grand gestures, no last-minute confessions in the rain. What they had now was better. Something built, day by day. Something chosen. And that, she realized, was the most extraordinary thing of all. Life is not about the roles we inherit but the choices we make. Lena and Noah's journey teaches us that true fulfillment comes when we step beyond expectations and embrace who we really are. Noah had wealth, status, and a predetermined future, yet none of it brought him happiness. Lena, on the other hand, had always lived within the constraints of reality, working hard, making sacrifices, but she, too, had to learn that guarding her heart too tightly could keep out more than just pain, it could keep out love. Their story reminds us that second chances matter. Not just in love, but in all aspects of life. As we grow older, it's easy to believe that change is behind us, that our paths are set in stone. But the truth is, it's never too late to redefine our story. Whether it's rekindling a lost connection, pursuing a long-forgotten dream, or simply allowing ourselves to be open to new experiences, life is always offering us a chance to start again. The question is, will we take it?